Sarah works hard, pulling double shifts at a small restaurant that barely covers rent and living expenses. One afternoon, she sees an elderly homeless man with a wrinkled face on the sidewalk. Although she only has $80 for Thanksgiving dinner, Sarah decides to sacrifice the money and buy the man a hot meal. 3 days later, a well-dressed man enters the restaurant carrying a letter that will turn Sarah's small act into something that will touch millions of hearts around the world. Hello everyone, welcome to Stories to Heal. Today I am excited to share a new story with you. Don't forget to subscribe and watch to the end. Sarah is a young woman who works as a waitress at Ruby's Diner, a small restaurant in downtown Chicago. Every day she goes through a challenging routine. Most of the money she earns from her hard work at the restaurant is used to pay the rent on her small apartment and to meet her daily needs. Although she often works double shifts, Sarah feels that what she receives is still not enough, let alone to save for or celebrate big days like Thanksgiving, which she almost always misses. Morning after morning, as she opened the restaurant, Sarah would see an old homeless man sitting on a bench across from the restaurant. His name was James. His graying hair and gentle eyes always reminded Sarah of her long-dead grandfather. James was often seen rummaging through the trash around the restaurant for food, and the sight always touched Sarah's heart. Despite her own poverty, she felt compelled to do something. "Don't mind him, Sarah," one of her coworkers would say in a slightly mocking tone. "He's just driving away customers." In fact, some customers had complained that James' presence seemed to disrupt their comfort, but Sarah could not just ignore him. Every time she received a few dollars in tips, she put some aside and brought James a cup of hot coffee. "Thank you, darling," James said with a sincere smile. "I lost my house after I got sick, and I can't afford the medical bills," he told Sarah. His words touched Sarah's heart, and she felt that her small act of kindness could ease the old man's suffering a little. One day, Sarah planned to use the $80 she had saved from tips to buy herself a small Thanksgiving dinner. But that night, the weather was very cold and nasty. When Sarah saw James still sitting on the bench where he usually sat, his body seemed to be shivering with cold. Sarah's heart ached more than her own empty stomach, and without hesitation she decided to change her plan. The tip money that had been intended for her own dinner would now be used to buy hot food for James. With her hands shaking from the cold, Sarah went to the store and bought bread, a small turkey, and some simple side dishes for dinner. When she gave the food to James, the old man looked touched, tears streaming down his cheeks. "God bless you," he said in a husky voice. Sarah just smiled and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, feeling that her kindness that night was enough to give him some warmth in his life, even as she returned to the cold apartment with an empty stomach. That night, even though her stomach was empty and hungry, Sarah's heart felt warm and peaceful. Little did she know that the small act of kindness she did that night, though seemingly simple, would make a huge difference in her life, and even change the lives of many people in this world in unexpected ways. The next day, Sarah arrived at the restaurant early as usual. As soon as she walked in, her eyes immediately fell on James' usual bench that she saw every day. But this time, the bench was empty, covered in thick frost, clearly indicating that James had not returned. "I hope James is okay," Sarah whispered with worry in her heart, feeling anxious and hoping that everything would be okay with the man. But soon something unexpected happened. A handsome man, wearing an expensive suit and perfectly groomed, entered the restaurant. Without hesitation, he ordered a cup of coffee and sat down at a table not far from Sarah's. The man sat quietly, occasionally glancing at his surroundings and jotting something down in his notebook. Every day, for several days in a row, he came just to order the same coffee, sit in the same place, and say nothing. It was only on the third day, after days of silent meetings, that he finally opened his mouth and spoke to Sarah. "Sarah, I'm Michael Thompson, a private investigator. I'm looking for someone. Do you know this man?" Michael asked, showing a photo of James when he was young, wearing a business suit. Sarah was shocked. That's "That's James," she replied, her voice shaking. Michael explained that James was actually the CEO of Harrison Technologies, a well-known large technology company. After his wife died, James felt depressed and unable to cope. He then decided to donate most of his wealth to various charities and disappeared from public life. His daughter, who had been looking for him for years, finally hired Michael to find him. Michael also explained that James wore a wedding ring and a small silver chain that was often seen around his neck, a memento of his late wife. "What happened to James now?" Sarah asked curiously. "He went to his daughter's house the morning after Thanksgiving," Michael replied. "But before he left, he asked me to find the waitress who showed him kindness when no one else cared." Sarah was deeply moved by these words. But Sarah's life did not end there. The next day, Sarah arrived early at the restaurant where she usually worked, full of curiosity. As soon as she entered the restaurant, her eyes immediately fell on a man sitting in her usual seat. James, who used to look disheveled, now looked much more groomed and was wearing a luxurious suit that added to his charm. Beside him sat a beautiful young woman with a friendly and graceful face. The woman turned out to be James' daughter, whose name was Emma. "Allow me to introduce my daughter, Emma," James said in a soft voice full of gratitude. "Your kindness has brought me back to my family and given hope to someone who has long felt lost and forsaken. You gave food to a forgotten man, expecting nothing in return." Emma looked at Sarah with teary eyes, her heart filled with emotion. "Your kindness has truly changed our lives," she said in an emotional voice, as if every word carried the weight of deep gratitude. A moment later, Michael entered with some documents in his hand. "James has something to tell you, Sarah," he said earnestly. James smiled and announced that he had started a foundation called the Sarah Wilson Foundation, which would focus on caring for and helping the homeless. "We're starting with $5 million, James said proudly. Sarah was shocked and didn't know what to say, but the surprises didn't stop there. "Sarah, I'm buying this restaurant," James said with a big smile. "I want you to be the manager and own the majority of the shares." James also passionately explained that he had a plan to transform Ruby's Diner into a place that not only served delicious food to its customers, but also a place where the homeless could come and get free food without feeling ashamed or ostracized. Sarah could not hold back her tears. She was so touched and moved by James' incredible and genuine kindness. "You saw me as a human being, not just a homeless person," James said gratefully, his eyes filled with emotion. "Your selfless kindness never expected anything in return." That day, the restaurant was in the spotlight. Sarah's inspiring story of kindness began to spread around the world, touching the hearts of many and inspiring them to donate and help others in need. A month later, Sarah stood in the restaurant's newly renovated kitchen and enthusiastically served over 200 meals to those who came. "Today we were able to feed more people than ever before," she said proudly to the hardworking kitchen team. Emma arrived with a letter from the city council announcing that the restaurant would be opening 3 more locations. "We are very excited to announce that the restaurant will soon be expanding with 3 new locations," she said with uncontrollable excitement. When Sarah heard the news, she smiled happily and felt a wave of happiness rise up inside her. Now she no longer had to worry about tips or rent, which had always weighed on her. Her life was now filled with a desire to give and help others, to bring happiness and benefit to those around her. In her heart, Sarah knew that even the smallest act of kindness could make a huge difference and inspire more people to do good. Like this story? Click like and subscribe for more stories, and share your thoughts with a word in the comment section.